plugin of the week is the Softube Fet Compressor. The Softube Fet Compressor is an emulation of the famous 1176 compressor. And while they don't get very specific into in the documentation in terms of which one they modeled, it's very obvious that that's what they modeled, and when you look at the settings, it becomes even more obvious. Well, it doesn't have the look and design of the original 1176. It does have all the settings, and with a whole bunch of other options that allow you more flexibility than the original component had. So the FET compressor, FET stands for Field Effects Transistors, and basically it's a solid state component used to employ gain. And what's cool about FET components is you can get very fast attack and release characteristics and timings. And this was part of what made the 1176, when it came out in the late 60s and early 70s, depending upon the silver face or blackface version, and all the variations and revisions that were kind of in between, it made it a very popular unit. It also allowed you to get some pretty heavy compression characteristics without the sound really collapsing. So you would hear the compression, but you wouldn't get the distortion. So when I say collapse, it's when, sometimes if you really, really over compress with a Veramute compressor or an optical compressor, it'll flatten out the top end. Like it'll just really pancake the sound in a way that's not good. And this will keep some of the characteristics and the frequency response of the sound even with heavier amounts of compression, and that makes it very desirable. So when you actually go through the unit, the main input and output knobs, which are the two main knobs to the left on the 1176, the original unit, the input knob sets the gain reduction, or the threshold, essentially. So you're bringing the input gain up over a fixed threshold, and therefore the amount of gain will determine how much passes above threshold, and then the attack and release settings take over from there. The output is just used to make up for whatever gain or gain reduction that you're getting. Now on the left here we have the ratio, and on the original device you had 4 switches: 4-to-1, 8-to-1, 12-to-1, 20-to-1. And if you hit all 4 buttons in at the same time, you would actually put it into what I would call a hyper compression mode. And I think what it does is it just overloads the bias circuit or something, and then just the thing just goes crazy. So then you're going into a real crazy compression kind of mode, which is very cool for a lot of different things. Works amazingly well on vocals, also really great for overheads and room tracks and drum tracks if you're doing like just a compression on a drum kit, which is how we're going to demonstrate it here. What's also cool with the ratio is that it gives you the ability to go to any variation in between, from 1-to-1 or all the way up to the all button. So you can click on them to get the exact settings, or you can go to any variation between, and that adds a lot of dimension to the actual plugin that's better than or more flexible than, let's just put it that way, than the original component. The attack is a very fast attack all the way across. So even on its slow setting, which the way it's labeled is sort of backwards in terms of the way that the numbers are laid out, but it's slow all the way to the left and fast all the way to the right. The fast time is like 20 microseconds, so that's 0.02 milliseconds, all the way up to 800 microseconds, which is 0.8 milliseconds. So you have a pretty fast attack all the way around. The release characteristic gives you a lot more variation, from 50 milliseconds on the fast side all the way up to 1.1 seconds on it. And I bet if you tested all the different components, they would actually have, they would exhibit different numbers in terms of the attack and the release timings, just based on, consistency of the components and all of those other basic things. So that's how it's spec'd out by them. Now, there are some additional knobs here which add function. So on the original unit, this is a series of 4 switches, and then you have attack, release, input, output, and that's pretty much what you have to go, and an on-off button. That's pretty much all you got. Here you have a parallel injection, and what this allows you to do is it allows you to mix in the compressed signal with the dry signal. And so you can do that here. And this way, if you put it on, say, a drum stem or something like that, which we'll demonstrate, it's exactly what I have set up here, then you can put that in, get some really, really heavy compression, and mix in as much as you want. So that's a big thing. The detector circuit is basically a parallel that feeds the sidechain input for the gain reduction circuit. So in effect, when the audio signal comes into the unit, the signal gets split, and one signal goes into the gain reduction circuit, the other gets split and goes into the detector circuit, which has a low cut and a high cut filter. And then it also has a look-ahead feature, so it allows you to sort of pre-trigger or send the signal ahead of time to make the attack time even faster. So you can get it to basically anticipate peak energy if you want it to. Now on this, if you have a sidechain input as a key input, then you would turn that on, and then the sidechain signal would feed into the detector circuit, and then that would inform the gain reduction circuit how to apply the attack and release characteristics, or how responsive it is. So the idea here then is that with the detector circuit, if you have like low frequency energy over making the compression not breathe or pump enough, then you can kind of filter some of that out. Or if the high frequencies are making it, not smooth enough, then you can filter out some of the high frequencies, and that's the basic way that you would use it. So it's a very beautiful thing. The original unit didn't have anything like this, so this is kind of a cool thing that they've added in here. All right, so let's have a little bit of a listen, go over a couple things. Let's start with like a simple basic 4-to-1 compression, and we'll start by setting the input gain. So I'll start with a bypass so we can hear a little bit of drums as an example. So I'm going to bring down the input gain here just to kind of get like a small amount of gain reduction here. Just kind of get a little bit of a vibe here. Maybe this is kind of a smoother kind of thing. I actually kind of liked where that was set. And then I can balance out the output. And if I want it to be a little bit less responsive, I can slow down the attack there so it triggers a little bit more consistently. I'm going to have it release a little faster to kind of open up the sound. So it's just like a subtle pump. And if I increase the ratio, get a little bit more of a different characteristic here. So you can hear when I bypass it in there how it's kind of releasing. So let's go back here to the beginning and try something different. So that was just kind of one approach. And I'll try something with a higher ratio where you might want to have a little bit more of a kind of peak thing here. I'll kind of roll off a little bit of the low frequencies and kind of soften the release time here so we can get a little bit more of like a peak gain reduction kind of thing. This will kind of control a little bit more of the snare energy. So that's another way to basically use it. The other way is to go into the hyper compression mode, which is where most people, or a lot of people, kind of go to this. And it gives us a lot more variation. Usually with this, I'll go to like a slower attack time, even though it's still very, very fast. And then I'll quicken up the release, so I want a recovery. Now, when you go to the actual all mode, when you hit all 4 buttons in, what ends up happening is the gain reduction meter actually pins on the actual physical unit. And you don't really ever see accurate gain reduction, but you can hear the effect of it. It's basically just completely overdriving the gain reduction circuit. And so you get this really, really hyperactive kind of compression, which adds it adds a distortion and a lot of energy into the track. So I'm going to drive the input gain up a lot higher. All right, so I'll bring down the output gain. So with this heavy kind of compression in here, one of the things that we can do, this is where we can use the parallel inject. So we can go from a dry signal and mix in as much of that as we want. Try to balance the gain out here a bit. And you can really hear how that kind of just, brings a lot of the energy. You don't have to mix a lot of it in. It's sort of like having like a parallel kind of squash track, a hyper compression track. But you can have it all on one insert. This can be used on a wide variety of things. This is just one example on drums. It's really great, this particular effect with vocals, when you want that really, really, really up close, very extremely present, because that pumping and breathing adds a lot of like up close energy. You really hear all of the detail and articulation and the little bubbles in people's mouths and every little breath and noise. And that helps to bring something, make it sound like really, really, really close up front in the speakers. And so that's like a really cool mode for things like that. Great on like overhead tracks, great on room tracks, especially when you want to key them externally and kind of drive some pretty heavy compression with the kick and the snare. It's really, really amazing for that. They actually had a stereo unit out, 1178. Which was a stereo 1176, and you didn't see a lot of them, but that was actually very amazing for that. And but anyway, this is the Softube Fet Compressor, basically an emulation of the 1176, and with a lot of extra options that make it a really, really cool plugin, and a nice alternative to a lot of the other 1176 emulations, which may look like the surface of the original but don't have the flexibility of this particular unit. There we have it, plugin of the week.